Well, good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see. I already see some familiar faces. Good morning, Sam. Good morning, Thad. So good morning to everybody. It's really great to see everybody this morning with your coffee mugs bright and early. So we come together every month to talk about great ideas, to talk about innovation, hot topics, and more with fascinating guests in the world of cardiology, medicine, healthcare, and beyond. So I'm Dipti Itchhaporia, president of the American College of Cardiology, and I'm thrilled to welcome you today to our virtual coffee table. So we look forward to an interactive session today, and we've allotted the last half of the discussion for open Q&A for from all of you. So I invite you to follow along also on Twitter using the hashtag ACC Coffee Table. So I want a reminder for the virtual engagement. Please remain muted when not speaking, and we encourage the use of the WebEx chat feature. At the end, though, we hope that you'll be able to join us in the question period. And if I call on you, I would like for you to have your camera ready, and so that you can chat with us. We'd like to see who's asking the question. And if you're viewing this live today on WebEx, click the layout button in the right upper corner, and under the stage view, select Stack for the optimal experience. So anyway, without further ado, I'm really excited that I'm joined by Dr. Randall Hyer, who's the VP of Global Medical Affairs for Moderna, and Dr. Vincent Covello, founder and director of the Center for Risk Communication. So let me tell you about these two gentlemen that we're going to be spending the next hour with. Dr. Vincent Covello is the founder and director of the Center for Risk Communication and a global expert on and practitioner on risk, crisis, and high stress communication. He's the author or co-author of more than 150 articles in scientific journals and the author and editor of more than 20 books. One of Dr. Covello's most popular publications is Effective Media Communication During Public Health Emergencies. And his most recent book is titled Communication and Risk, Crisis and High Stress Situations, Evidence-Based Strategy and Practice. And this book is just perfect for any professional who finds himself in a position of communicating with and educating the public during crisis and disasters, which is very pertinent given just what we've gone through. Anyway, his book is coming out in December, so I hope that you all look for that. It's called Communication in Risk, Crisis, and High Stress Situations, Evidence-Based Strategy and Practice. So Dr. Covello's work has been applied nationally and globally to a wide range of topics, including disease outbreaks, radiologic incidents, industrial accidents, food safety, hospital emergencies, climate change, and physician and patient communications. He's actually held a number of positions over his career, including assistant professor of clinical medicine and environmental sciences at Columbia University and a study director at the National Academy of Sciences. So welcome, Vincent Covello, Dr. Covello. The next we have Dr. Randall Hyer, who's a risk and crisis management consultant with a broad experience, including disease outbreaks, product safety concerns, reorganizations and downsizing of outbreak investigations, and strategic communications. He's the vice president for risk communication at the National Council for Radiation Protection and Measurement. He advises the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine, and lectures at Harvard University. Dr. Hyer has over 15 years of experience in biotechnology with vaccines, biologics, and biosimilars. In 2017, he was pivotal in engaging the scientific, medical, and policy communities to help achieve FDA approval of a new adult hepatitis B vaccine, the first vaccine using a truly novel adjuvant. He is the senior vice president for global medical affairs at Moderna. Dr. Hyer has developed communication and managed the global outroll of the COVID-19 mRNA vaccine. And so I think we're really excited to talk to both of them about the vaccine hesitancy. How do you communicate during these difficult times? So welcome, Dr. Hyer. So, gentlemen, let's get right into it. I think this is really exciting. First of all, thank you so much for both of you taking the time to be with us. Vincent, I'll start with you. Tell me about, obviously the last year and a half is more than any of us we're looking for. Our professional lives, our personal lives were in havoc. But I mean, most of my colleagues continue to work. We didn't close our offices. We didn't close our practices. We did do telehealth for a short period of time. In fact, we were 5% telehealth, went up to 90%. We're back down to 40%. But tell me about, it's been difficult. Tell me about some of the tools that you would say that that we have to think about during those times when we're communicating with our patients.
Yeah, well, this has been a difficult, I think we're getting close to 2 years now in a very high stress environment caused at a minimum by the pandemic, but also all the changes that have taken place, changes in our behavior. We're supposed to stay distanced, virtual learning, virtual distance learning. I believe I've now used for the purposes of trainings or workshops, 9 different platforms for communicating with colleagues or with larger audiences. And each one has gremlins in it. I don't think I've ever gone through a single session without some sort of hiccup that disturbs the interaction. And these are something new for us. In fact, it's a changed environment in so many different ways. And the relevance for communication is, I would argue that the background against which we communicate, and now we have in the front rows, we have pandemic. Behind that, though, we have lots of other changes that are making the stress levels go up, which makes communication more difficult. One of the key conclusions of the risk communication high stress literature that when people are stressed, they have difficulty processing information, difficulty hearing, understanding, and remembering. And when you start adding those stress factors on, stress after stress after stress, and there's 3 in particular that I think are causing more stress in addition to the pandemic. Number one is loss of trust in expertise. A lot of research has been showing that we're seeing a hemorrhaging of trust in major institutions, not the old ones that are the usual suspects, but also now the business and religion and politics, and now the broader scientific community has been taken into this, you could argue, black hole of loss of trust. That's one. The second is how people get information. Radical changes in how people get information, which have huge implications for communications. Social media. I mentioned that the book Dr. and Hyer write, Randy, and we're going to use first names, I believe. Randy and I wrote back in 2005. We didn't have a chapter on social media. It was effective media communication during public health emergencies. We didn't have a chapter on social media. In that latest book, I would say 1/4 of the book is devoted to social media. That if you're not playing in the social media field, if you're not playing well, you are effectively not playing. That's another stressor, especially for those who are not familiar with social media, don't have expertise in it. And the third is expectations. I think the expectations now is that we do communicate much better than we did in the past. That because of loss of trust, you give the role of decision-making to the authority, to the expert. When you have many different sources of information available, you're stressed because you're doing things differently, behaviors, et cetera, that we have higher expectations about communication skills. And so having just the facts is not enough. Having just not the facts is not enough. And especially when also we're getting evaluated now by Yelp and all these different things. It's not just simply that we meet people, let's say in our offices, we're even getting evaluated. The last thing I'm just going to say, and then I'll ask Randy if he would like to comment on this, all these different changes, which is that we also been a change in our knowledge about how to communicate well in high stress situations. There's been quite literally a tsunami of information now about how best to communicate in high stress situations, coming from the behavioral and neurosciences, as well as virtually every discipline. And perhaps we can touch on those. I've already touched on one, which is people have difficulty processing information. We know that if you share a negative, you need at least 3 positives to offset a negative. We know that people want to know that you care before they care what you know. These have been around for a long time, but now we're validating them through sophisticated research. And it'd be wonderful to apply this in our discussion to COVID and vaccines and other type of high stress events. That's about as thumbnail as I can give it.
Wow, but Bitsy, you said a lot of stuff in that, right? I mean,
Right.
For each negative, say 3 positives. I mean, there's a lot to unpack just in all the stuff that you said. But Randy, tell me about some of these concepts. And we've seen vaccine hesitancy. So obviously, what Vincent is saying is true in trying to communicate to patients about, especially now, this new mRNA vaccine. I mean, my gosh, I don't ever remember the kinds of conversations that we're having now. talk to me about that. How do you apply some of the things that Vincent has brought into, into how we talk about the vaccine to patients, and how do we deal with vaccine hesitancy? I mean, it's a huge topic.
Hey, good morning, Dipti, and first of all, thank you again for this opportunity. I mean, it is an enormous topic. I do a lot of work with the National Council for Radiation Protection. Radiation is, another scary topic, but in my opinion, COVID-19 has pushed radiation off the map, and so another level. Let's just think about it for a minute. It's fear that's driving this, of course. It's an unseen thing that is not well understood by many people that can kill you. The virus SARS-CoV-2 that causes COVID-19, and that by itself is already scary. It's just scary enough. And then let's layer in a vaccine, which is another scary topic. Vaccine hesitancy existed shortly after the smallpox vaccine was identified back in 1798 or whenever it was with Jenner. So vaccine hesitancy is an old story, always been with us. And just because the nature of vaccines may continue with us for some time or maybe always, I don't know yet. And then put that together, and then you have this vaccine on a scary topic already, and then layer in the fact that new technology really helped the vaccine come forward, and because of new ways of developing vaccines, specifically the unprecedented cooperation we saw across so many stakeholders to bring the vaccines to emergency use authorization so quickly in the same calendar year. I mean, come on.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, let's just step back for a second and realize what happened. July was it? I think it was January 11th. The sequence was verified of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Of course, just weeks after the thing was identified, and identified quickly, by the way. And then in the same calendar year, December 18th, I think it was, the FDA issued emergency use authorization. That's just never been done before. And it's just a miracle. I mean, it is certainly this side short of a miracle. I mean, it's amazing achievement. And so many people are involved, so many people, not just the people who are developing the vaccine, but all the volunteers, the regulators, the US government, the close cooperation with people, academic institutions, our investigators, the contract research organization. The list goes on and on and on. I'm still just amazed at that. So couple the fact that it was fast. Okay, so we have a scary thing, and we're dealing with another scary thing called a vaccine. We have a scary thing called COVID-19, another scary thing called a vaccine, a new technology, and it was done at a speed that no one had ever witnessed before. And this all couples into just literally a cauldron of fear. And so how do you deal with fear? To deal with fear, you have to establish trust. Trust is the absolute credibility. How do you get trust? Well, trust is challenging to get in many ways. There has to be people when fear is in the room. We're dealing with a high concern, low trust setting for communication, so-called risk and crisis communication, which Dr. Covello or Vincent and I've been working on for many years. And you need to meet people on their own terms, on their ground. You have to show some empathy, so you have to stand in their shoes for a minute so they can feel that you stand in their shoes for a minute. Then that gives you an opportunity to get information across. But people's bandwidth to process that information is so limited in that high stress setting. And I'll give you a real world example of that. Just yesterday, there was a fire in my house. I mean, a real live fire where I had to evacuate my home. Okay. And I can tell you, my mental noise.
I can validate that because we spoke last night, and I started with empathy and caring when he told me I've had a fire.
Yeah, a fire. My ability to process information and to do what I needed to do was greatly limited. And I just had to be very simple in what I told people and what I told myself in order to function. Otherwise, you're paralyzed by fear, or just reacting to fear. It's hard. And I just realized why it's so important. We use things like 3-digit numbers for emergency numbers like 911, because that's about all I could manage. And so let's move out of my situation back to the world of COVID-19. So in that, there has to be some degree of, you have to show some empathy. We have to speak in simple simple words that are easy to comprehend. Average grade level drops enormously during times of stress. We need to use 3 key messages. I'm going to show you a template for that we use very successfully called a message map, where we keep 3 key messages in short phrases that people can easily digest so that key information can sink in. So when I'm standing there on my phone, trying to figure out what to do when I'm watching the flames pour out of my house, I just need to think very, I can't process much information. I can process 3 key messages. That's about it. Then I have time to go into more details once I establish that part with you. Another key part of this is transparency. When people are concerned and fear, they fear the unknown. The fear of the unknown is probably one of the strongest fears there is. So how do we fight the fear of the unknown? What is a vaccine? What is this mRNA? Why is this so fast? Why is COVID? Why is it? Why do I have to wear a mask? Why? Why? It was transparency and information. So transparency is being absolutely open about what's taking place, why we're doing it, and so on. Moderna, in that sense, really led the pack because we published the phase 3 protocol on the internet back, I think it was in March or April of 2020. It's sort of almost never been done before in a development of a product, to publish it on the internet. Go download it, please.
But let me ask you, because most people, I mean, maybe a layperson may not understand the phase 3 protocol, but I think
no.
but I mean, like when you're talking to a patient, I understand what you're saying. I think, Vincent, you said facts alone are not enough.
Right. That's right. And this is actually contradictory to the way often we like to communicate when we have expertise, is we believe the facts will affect decision-making. Another finding is that what affects decision-making in high-stress situations or stress situations of uncertainty or fear, there's about 20 different factors that go into that decision-making process. Professor Kahneman at Princeton opened up an entire understanding of the human brain and how complex decision-making is, including the shortcuts we use in order to make decisions. But the one that I think relates very much to what Randy just said is the first of those factors are not the facts, it's trust. The first question they will decide upon before they even listen to the facts, let alone understand the facts and act on the facts, is do you care? Are you listening? Do you understand? Are you trying to understand my position? Let alone empathy and compassion, which is the ultimate goal of the first step in effective high-stress communication. Very, very contrary to the way we're taught to teach, to share with others, where we just simply assume the facts are enough. If we can get the facts right, accurate, and we share those facts with others, they will make the right decisions. That is about as contrary as to what we've learned about communication as any possible proposition.
Randy, how do you develop that trust? I mean, this is somebody coming in, they don't want to take the vaccine. They've decided, no way, I'm just not going to do it. I don't trust you. And, it's interesting because you said, we typically think, okay, just present the facts and that should sway them. But clearly you just told us that doesn't. And you said, build trust as first. And then you said, have 3 messages.
Yeah.
Talk me through it. I mean, you're talking to a patient. Tell me about that.
So Dipti, let me just, absolutely. Let me just build on what Vincent said. I'll give you an example. There was I think he was an 18-year-old person, a young guy whose mother called me and said, I want my son vaccinated. He doesn't want the vaccine. Can you talk to him, please? I said, sure, of course I will. And I started the conversation. The conversation might have been, 10 minutes, let's say. I don't think I talked about the vaccine until the last 30 seconds. It was all about empathy. I tried to understand. I said, tell me who you are and where are you going and what are you thinking? What do you know about that? Do you know about COVID-19? Tell me about COVID-19. What's your impression? Now, all I did was sort of listen and get him to talk about it. And then finally I got to, he said, I said, do you know anybody who's had COVID-19? Oh yeah. Did they do very well? I don't think they did very, you could see him trying to build a story in his mind. And all I really did was listen. So this is the way I showed empathy and building trust with him, was showing that I was willing to listen, active listening. I was repeating what he was saying. I was paraphrasing and so on. And when we got to the end, I finally said, well, there is a vaccine available and the government authorities have shown it to be safe and effective, and you may want to consider getting it. And that's all I said. And I thought, I didn't know what he would do. His mother called me the next day and she had smile from ear to ear. So.
So you mentioned this, the 3 messaging. Talk a little bit more about that. The 3 short messages to get your point across.
Yeah, I'll start and Vincent can probably finish really well. So we developed this model called the 2793 message map of key messages. And the idea here is to present the high level facts in short, basically 9 words each messages that somebody can rapidly assimilate, digest. And that allows them to get the key pieces of information. It's obviously very high level at 9 words a message, but it's designed to be. And then after that messages get across, then you have the opportunity to dive into the details. I think where we as physicians, and I was in practice, we know a lot, of course, and we're partly educators. That's one of our major roles in life. Yet I'm not sure how much role training we get on educating these high concern, high stress situations, where giving somebody all the facts is probably just going to increase the distance between us and them because they're afraid of the facts right now. The facts may be they have cancer. The facts may be that there's a scary vaccine they know they need. And these are the facts. And I think you have to meet them first at that high level. So we talk about building empathetic transition. So that was what I did with this young man. I was talking on the phone. I did it by listening to him. And then I had the opportunity to present the facts to him. And I actually did present 3 key messages about the vaccine. And then I asked him if he wanted more information. He said, no, I think I have what I need. So I didn't go into the details. I told him he could call me back. Now it turns out he went and got the vaccine, so that was great. So that this ability, this layered information is what I'm talking about. And I can tell you this works in all kinds of settings, not just COVID-19. It actually works with the FDA. And other places. It's a really powerful tool. And we can show an example or what a message map might look like if you want to have a look at that.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's take a look at it. I love the fact that you said that it is about not just COVID-19, but anything. And in fact, one of our listeners is the president of the European Society of Cardiology, Stefan Achenbach, and he just said, it could be with patients with a heart attack, right? Myocardial infarction or other diseases. So that's a crisis situation because people are going through stress. So I love this. So I really want to make sure that the listeners come away with how we message this. So love to see that board.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll show. Go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that with the message map, we move from theory into practice. That it's great to have a great theory, for example, 1N = 3P, or care and empathy. People want to know before they care what you know. You have to turn that into something people can use, an actual tool. And we found that this tool of message mapping helps us to meet all the conditions of best practices in communication and apply it to different things, such as applied it to pandemic influenza. We had 3 key messages: wash your hands, stay home if you're sick, cover your cough or sneeze. We also had this for COVID. 8 times we redid the 75 questions about COVID for the state health directors. Each time we had to change the 3 key messages because the changing nature of the science. This also says something about a change in the world where information is being so rapidly developed, and we have to incorporate that into our processes for sharing information. So Randy, I think, is going to show an example of a message map, and we might even do one relates specifically to heart conditions too, just to illustrate how it might work. Is that right?
Yeah, I will to that. And so, Vincent, these are the slides that are taken from our message mapping clinic. Okay, so I'll show these. So, I can share the screen now. Okay, so hopefully you can all see this, and this will go away so we can see it better. There it is. Great. Okay, so a message map is really just a simple template in order to respond to that key question or concern. Okay, and I want you to notice, so we have this little box. It's just a easy way to write it. You can do this. You don't have to have this template. You can do it on a note card, on the back of an envelope, on the back of your hand. I've done it sometimes when I've been really pressed for time, or it's best working out in advance. But the question goes here at the top. Then there's this empathetic transition, and empathy has to be genuine to be real, because you're trying to make that connection. Okay, and the what we do is we in the case example I gave you of this young man I was listening to, I mostly just listened. That was my way of showing empathy. Another way, empathy is just repeating the question. And this is important because you want to establish that foothold with the audience. The audience can be a patient, can be a patient's family. It can be a large group of patients, large group of physicians. It can be a state legislature you're talking to. It could even be the U.S. Congress, could be, whoever you're talking to. You want to establish that transition. so that they feel for a minute that you care. Because they do want this, Aristotle said it, they want to know that you care before they care what you know. And it's really
Well,
true.
and I'll add just one more. There's a great deal of research to indicate that that single message, persuading people that you're listening, caring, can account for as 50% of trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
It dominates the trust determination process.
So
And so
can I
then,
put an example in there? So let's say we're talking about somebody that just had a heart attack. So the question is, you're going to go, you just did a procedure on them. You're going to go talk to them to tell them what just happened. So the question is, what just happened? And so the first thing to do is say, how are you doing? For example, how are you doing? And then listen to how they're feeling and all of that. And so kind of discuss it. Because typically what we do is we go and say, okay, you had a heart attack. This is what we did, blah, blah, blah. You're just going straight into the facts. Tell me how you would redo that.
Right, Randy,
Yeah,
maybe I
so-
could suggest for Dipti, maybe I could actually do this for specifically for someone who's A, has heart conditions, and B, is worried about a vaccine. They were combining things
Okay,
together.
let's do that.
So that,
Okay.
so I'm going to ask Randy. We're going to do a role play.
Okay.
Dr. Hyer, I'm one of these people that you call vaccine hesitant. In fact, I'm very close to vaccine refusal. And one of the reasons is because I have a heart condition. I've been hearing all this stuff about cardio problems, et cetera, and I certainly don't want to put myself at more risk. I've got a lot of people on a Facebook group who tell me under no condition should I ever get, for example, a vaccine given my heart conditions. So tell me, what would you recommend on this? You're my personal physician.
Sure, Vincent. Well, hey, Vincent, good morning, and thank you for asking this question. And from what I understand, what you said that you have a heart condition. Of course, that's why you're here, and you're concerned, or you have questions about the vaccine from information you've heard from various sources. Is that right?
Yeah, it's absolutely right. In fact, I know you also developed it very fast, and that makes me even more nervous. I don't like
Sure,
people developing things fast that they're going to put into my body. So, so
sure.
tell me, would you recommend that I get the vaccine?
Sure. Yes. Let me address that. Uh, I also understand that you're concerned about the speed. So let's go into some key facts here. One is that the vaccine has been demonstrated in rigorous scientific studies to prevent people from getting COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, the vaccine also has been demonstrated to have an excellent and favorable safety profile.
Okay.
And number three, key public health recommending committees around the world continue to recommend the vaccine for everyone to protect them from COVID-19.
Oh, that's interesting. Can you tell me more about the first thing you said about it? It's related to COVID-19. You actually can get a heart condition from COVID-19. Is that what I just heard you say? Yeah.
In effect, you can, yes. It has been shown that certain heart conditions are much more likely to occur after somebody has suffered through COVID-19. Indeed, there's data showing that people who were hospitalized, who had COVID-19, were 16 times more likely to have a certain type of heart condition than those who are not. Also, in the pre-vaccine era, when people were being hospitalized for COVID-19, up to 30% of people hospitalized for COVID-19 disease had some sort of heart injury.
Well, this makes me feel better. But to tell you the truth, I can't even remember. You said you had three things to say, and I can't even remember what the second and third were. Can you help me?
Sure.
I'm just this is so scary that I'm really having trouble listening to you. So, can you tell me again? You said I think you said something about. I know that you said something about the WHO and others have statements about this, and then, but you did say something in the middle that I can't even remember anymore.
Sure. So just to rephrase, Vincent, to answer your questions and hopefully give you information to help you with those questions, the COVID, there is a vaccine for COVID-19. The vaccine has been shown to be safe and effective for preventing COVID-19. And key public health recommending bodies around the world recommend the COVID-19 vaccine, saying that the benefits far outweigh the risks of the vaccine.
And can you talk more specifically about cardio? What about the effects in terms of how worried should I be about the cardio effects of the vaccine?
Yeah, so let me, what I'm going to do is I actually wrote a message map on this. I'm going to go to that, Dr. Covello, so we can show the audience better.
Okay, good.
Here we go. Let me get to that one. Here it is. Okay, so I actually wrote this one. So the question, of course, is a very topical question, and that may be what Vincent was referring to is the myocarditis and COVID-19 vaccine. So
I mean,
here again,
nonetheless, that is in fact my question, even if I don't have that big word by which to frame it, right?
Yeah, sure. So Vincent, we I appreciate your question here about heart effects and COVID-19 vaccination, and you may have heard about something called myocarditis. I want to talk with you about that. And so I can appreciate your concern, of course, and your questions. And let me give you some information. Okay.
Good.
Yeah. So one is that we do know that myocarditis is associated with COVID-19 disease.
Okay. All right. Right.
We also know that myocarditis has been reported following COVID-19 vaccination.
That was the one I forgot. Right. That was the one I forgot. Right. Right.
And we know that the benefits, and this has been stated by, again, key public health recommending bodies around the world, including the US CDC, the World Health Organization, and others, that the benefit of vaccination far outweigh the risks.
Good. Now, I remember what you talked about it being associated with the disease. Can you tell me about the association with the vaccination? I think that was the second thing you said, right?
Sure. So there has been reports of myocarditis been reported following COVID-19 vaccination. These are most commonly reported in young males age 18 to 24 following the second dose. And these data are being analyzed around the world by the appropriate health authorities and public health recommending bodies.
Yeah, well, that makes me better knowing that it's the young folks. I'm much older than that. And when you say the benefits outweigh the risks, can you say a little bit more about that? It strikes me, at least for me, the benefit would be don't get the vaccine. I should be in that vaccine refusal group. Maybe I should tell my kids not to get the vaccine because we do have heart conditions in our family. Can you tell me more about what those benefits are?
Sure. Well, I think the most important benefit, I think if I can go back to that first key message I talked about, that myocarditis, because that was the heart condition you're concerned about,
Which is in my family.
associated.
We have
Yeah,
heart
is associated with COVID-19 disease. And
okay.
people with COVID-19 who are hospitalized are 16 times more likely to have myocarditis.
Good.
So before the vaccine. Yeah.
You guys have illustrated a lot of really great points there. Can you kind of recap for me? Just talking to a patient under stress, kind of those key messages that you were talking about. So develop trust, and you said don't just give information, because we'll give a lot of information, and don't just give facts. But it sounds like what you're saying is be empathetic, show that you're wanting to listen to them, develop some trust, and then go to 3 key messages that you want to convey and make them short and simple.
There it is. Good. And strange enough, you also have to repeat. I think there's another slide where we have these arrows. There's some unusual ways to communicate. They're not natural. It's not the way we typically share information. And yet it's been shown over and over in research it's the best way. I think we have a slide there with various arrows. Could you find that?
Yeah, I'll show that now. And so what I would like you to, if you just think the conversation, so there was the question, and the first thing I did is go to this empathetic transition with Vincent, right? I made sure that I showed an element of standing in his shoes and listening and hearing him. And that's important to establish that connection. Then I first mentioned the 3 key messages. I went right through them. I didn't race. Yeah, exactly. Tell me more, tell me again, precisely. That's really what this is.
To provide the 35,000 feet first, because as soon as you start getting to details, you will lose your patient. They'll get stuck on some particular fact, because like stoplight. So if there are 3 things you want them to use as a frame for making decisions, you get it out as quickly as possible in the top line with those 27 words, 9 seconds, 3 messages. Right?
They say that one again. You said it too fast.
I said that it's critical that you get out these 3 messages as quickly as possible in the briefest possible, concise way, because people will get lost. If you start going into more detail, let's say about key message number 1, that COVID is associated with heart disease, they will get lost in the woods. You start walking, you bump into trees. For example, they might get stuck on a particular fact.
Right. But you mentioned some time grid.
Yeah, the 2793. 2793 means that the mind, for still reasons not fully understood, tends to most receptive when information is organized in chunks of information. This was first alluded to by Aristotle 2,000 years ago. Chunking of information. Professor Miller back in 1956, chunking of information, the magic number 7. Later research, the magic number 3, which means when we chunk information, we chunk it in bytes of 27 words, 9 seconds, 3 messages. In response, after we've completed the caring, empathy, listening part, which establishes trust, half of our trust depends on how successful you are. Then you move into your first message, approximately 9 words, 9 seconds, 9 seconds, 9 seconds, or 9 words, 9 words, 9 words, and you've got your first 2793. So I'll just demonstrate that with Dr. Hyer. Dr. Hyer, I'm concerned about heart disease, and I don't want to get a vaccine and aggravate an already existing condition. And so after Dr. Hyer provided the care and empathy part, he immediately went across the top and gave me the big picture, Dr. Hyer, can you give me that big picture again? Because repetition is critical to effective communication. I forgot already what you said. What's the big picture?
So thank you, Vincent. So just to remind you and help you, the big picture, of course, is that we know that myocarditis is associated with COVID-19 disease. Myocarditis has been reported following COVID-19 vaccination, and the benefits of vaccination far outweigh the risks.
There's the 2793. I just saw it. 27 words, 9 seconds, 3 messages. We've now, so you could argue, we tilled the soil, we've created the framework for information, and now you can now interact with the patient. You can say, would you like to tell me more? Is that sufficient? Or, for example, is that enough, for example, to make you feel comfortable? If they say more, then you start a conversation. The whole notion of risk communication is to use it as a tool for dialogue, conversation. Now it may be that I don't want to have a conversation. I may be in a rush, but also I might go back. Can you tell me more about what you just said? And that gives the opportunity for an exchange of information taking place.
So it's 2793 going for the key messages and also for the supporting evidence. 2793. You want to do that the whole time.
That's right. Everything provided in chunks of 27 words, 9 seconds, 3 messages. Exactly.
Right. And Dipti, I'll get you some background on that. Is 9 seconds actually is the old soundbite.
I see.
Before there was so many, and the thing is editors couldn't edit.
Yeah. But let me ask you, when you're first doing that, I mean, we're not going to write it all out to do that. Do you do that enough in the beginning so that it just becomes natural? So you just know what that 27, 93 is? I mean, does that become more natural as time goes by?
Yeah,
it does.
Muscle memory. I use this at home with my wife when we have a high stress, high concern conversation. I think to myself, how can I be empathic? Listen. My first tendency is to want to share facts as opposed to listening, engaging in a conversation to understand truly what the stressor is. And then I organize knowledge in these groups of threes. It actually does become it's an unnatural way to organize information that could become natural. But it's been used by hundreds, thousands of years. Take someone like Julius Caesar. He realized he was involved with a high stress issue. He was supposed to put down a rebellion and sent out one of the shortest messages in history, Veni Vidi Vici. That's it. I came, I saw, I conquered. What a beautiful message map. He doesn't even have to use 20 words. He just used 3.
Now, I know we got a lot of questions already in the chat, and I know that we're keen on getting everybody to start asking their questions, but I want to take just the last minute with you guys to kind of have some closing words about how to stress communicate. So Vincent, I'll start with you, and then Randy, just a quick one-liner, and then we'll go to the questions. And I really want to hit on the social media part, and I see there's a question, so we'll start with that question first. So Vincent.
All right. Well, I'm going to repeat what I said in the very beginning, that there's a changed landscape in terms of, number one, COVID, pandemic as a background. Number 2, in terms of our knowledge associated with how do we communicate well. And number 3, a loss of trust. And Randy mentioned, for example, that is a key first task that we have as communicators. That should be about 27 words, by the way, if you added up what I just said.
And honestly, I'm going to kind of repeat what Vincent said, because it's really the bedrock of what we do. The ability to empathize, to stand in someone, to make the other person feel that you can stand in their shoes for at least a moment. And remember, risk communication is a dialogue. That's what it's based on. It's a dialogue where people feel they're sharing in the risk-making decision process, opposed to being told what to do. And even though in reality it may be more of the told, The fact that they can participate in that makes a huge difference. And trust. And you get half of the trust is your ability, half of the input that goes into trust. Remember, trust gives you credibility. With credibility, you can do things. You have ability to operate. We trust that it's listening, caring, empathy, and compassion. That's 50% of the trust input, and it's assessed almost immediately within the first 9 to 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So that's so important. If you must get that empathy, you must get that connection established, and then use the 2793 model to keep your top line, your high level, your 30,000 foot, easy to follow, easy to remember. And now somebody, if they ask you the next question, if they go one step further, you have a conversation and you have traction. Just like the example I gave with the 18-year-old man who was asking me about the vaccine, I was really establishing trust
Right.
for most of the conversation.
Quick,
No, I know. I know that.
People
Yeah.
decide sometimes trust in as little as 1 second in a high stress situation. Most recent research on the word hello. You're a physician, you say hello to your patient. They've already decided whether or not to trust you based on a single word and how you said it, the word hello.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we'll have to start thinking about how we say hello to our patients.
Can we do a workshop on that? There are 64 ways to say hello, and each carries a different set of messages on 10 different dimensions of the individual.
Wow. That's going to be another coffee, I can tell. So you mentioned, I know that your new book has a whole section on social media, which has never been done before. We have a listener, Sam. Sam has a question, and I wanted him to come on and just ask that question because I think it touches on what I wanted to talk about with the social media. How do we get the information? So Sam, do you want to get on and just ask us? I see you, but I don't. Go ahead and turn on your unmute yourself and ask that question.
Of course. Thank you, Dipti, Vincent. Thank you very much for this fantastic discussion. So my own experience goes way back before the COVID, pandemic. And that was when I was trying to kind of present my followers with fair information about e-cigarettes, for example. And I couldn't believe the amount of negative, comments and trolls that came after me. And basically every time I was posting something, scientific and fair, I was bombed with, negative comments. And after a while, I basically decided to not focus on individual comments and just focus on, straightforward and very clear, short messages on my, for example, Twitter account. So I'm interested in hearing from the panel here, how would they basically deal with these types of trolls and negative, misinformation campaigns on social media? I mean, in long term, it could be depressing for some of my colleagues to kind of, answer and respond to all of those comments. But what would be your approach to it?
So Sam, I'll start, and then I'll ask Randy if he'll will add his thoughts on this as well. And also, Sam, if you like, I could send you a pre-publication of the chapter. I actually have the page proofs already, so because I do address that issue very specifically. The first is, I'll go back to the message map, is that when you get someone, for example, disagreeing with what you said, let's say about e-cigarettes, et cetera, just go back to your original message. This is an opportunity, actually, in responding to the criticism, to reshare your message with others. And then the second tactic is to try as much as possible to listen. You're raising very important issues that need to be discussed so that you show that you are trying to put yourself in their shoes. And then recommend to the person that you speak with them offline. So you're using your original set of messages, the opportunity to repeat yourself. Number two, you're listening, trying to understand what's driving that person, where they're getting information from, but you do not address to the negative online. Instead, you go offline with that person. If you put it online, you basically have added fuel to the fire, and almost impossible to get away from the fire. And Randy knows a lot about fires because they had a fire yesterday.
Yeah.
And Sam, I want to add, thank you for sharing the story, first of all, and I can appreciate the challenge there. I think here is to have your key message about your story first and foremost, and keep it positive, keep using it, because repetition drives uptake, drives people. The more times they read something, the more times they'll believe it, and it sinks in. So use that concept of the sound bite expressed as we've shown in this 2793. In this case, it's those 3 key messages, and to use that is to retell your story. And I would agree totally with Vincent. Avoid getting into a verbal match on social media, because the social media trolls can outnumber you quickly, and it's not a fair fight. And it's better just to go to the high ground, say your story, and use that. And what you'll find is your story gets picked up and carried because it's easy to pick up and carry. It's not even just cut and paste; it's just easy for people to remember, and that tends to drive uptake and recognition and support for your story.
So Joe Marine has a question, and it kind of builds on this other question. So Joe, do you want to ask your question?
Certainly. Thank you for your great discussion. I'm sorry I'm not on camera. I'm traveling, and the video connection is not good. So my question in the chat is, in my view, a lot of the crisis that we're having in public trust comes from the fact that many of our experts, particularly early in the pandemic, said things that turned out not to be true, and were perhaps based upon educated guesses rather than science.
Right.
So my question is, how should leaders respond when the correct answer is, I don't know? And how do they recover when they've said something that turns out not to be true?
Sure. I'll start this off, and then Vincent, if you could please, we deal with this a lot. So, Joe, this is a great question. I think one of the things that's been missing from the COVID-19 pandemic communication is this element of recognizing uncertainty. This is a new virus, a new disease, and honestly, we don't know it all. We have to acknowledge uncertainty, that there will be things that we'll be finding out as we go along. There's ways to say it. It was said very well by Rich Besser in response to the H1N1, the 2009 flu pandemic. I think this is one feature I think that's been missing, this sort of implication that we know it all. We don't know it all. And we're finding as we're going, of course, we'll do our best to find out more information as fast as we can and change our tactics and our strategies appropriately. This is a huge part of the response, which I think it has to be said, particularly in a fast-moving, unprecedented event like COVID-19. Vincent, do you want to add to that?
I still am quite literally blown away by the way Dr. Richard Besser, who was the acting director of CDC during the pandemic influenza, how he began his conversation with the country. He talked about the fact that we care about this. This is a frightening issue. It's scaring a lot of people. And then he introduced what Dr. Hyer, Randy just mentioned, which is what we say today may have to change tomorrow. This is among his first communications to America. What we say today about this new disease may have to change tomorrow. That effectively science is a moving target. As we learn, we share it with you. If we know it, you know it. But nonetheless, that admission and acknowledgement of uncertainty, I would argue, was missing in the very beginning of COVID. Led to inconsistencies. You have one agency saying one thing, another agency, that's another way to drive trust into the bottom of the barrel. Because who should I believe under these circumstances? Because those admissions of uncertainty. The model we often use, though, is called a KDK, as opposed to starting with I don't know, which according to Professor Kahneman's Nobel Prize-winning work, you start with a negative. It's very hard to dig out of that hole once you're there. Start with a positive. It's called a KDK. What we do know is, and then you talk about, for example, COVID or pandemic. What we don't know is, and that's the critical one, that then we have to shift to what we don't know. There are many things we still don't know about, for example, COVID as a more general category of coronavirus. And what we're doing to find out is, that's the model, KDK. What we know, what we don't know, and what we're doing to find out. I would argue if we use that model at the very beginning, that many of the problems we've seen with communications about COVID could have been overcome.
Oh my gosh, I just love that. That is fantastic message, because you're right. I heard a long time ago that if you're running late to see a patient, that instead of coming in saying, I'm sorry that you had to wait, you should say, thank you so much for your patience. That was a better way, because you're doing a positive and it's affirming. And I've used it all the time, and it has been so positive. So I love what you just said. I love the KDK. So that's something that I think I'm really going to embrace. I know we don't have much time, but there's several other questions. Cesar Herrera, do you have a question about dealing with our own emotions as physicians when we're dealing with some of this? So Cesar, do you want to ask that question?
Yes, good morning. I'm not sure if my video is working.
Yes,
but,
we see you.
Hear you. We can see you. Hi, Cesar. Hi.
It's a great conversation, guys. It was more of a comment, Dipti, and thanks for moderating these. We as physicians have been trained to deal with bad news and communicate bad news, and we do it all the times. And perhaps, the example of the fire goes along with what I'm going to say, that rarely, thank God, we are victims or suffer similar things that our patients suffer, right? I mean, if you have a spouse that had a heart attack, you're probably more sensitive to communicate that news to somebody else. But this is the first time that fear in a true real way before the vaccinations come out. So, and this has been discussed, how do we handle the stress ourselves to then help patients handle it? How do we incorporate our own tools of healing ourselves, confronting, fear and disease, because many of us have had a relative who got COVID. And it was more of a comment. If anyone wants to add something to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I know you cut out a little bit, so I think it was in the chat just that how do we deal with our own fears simultaneously as we deal with some of the messaging?
Yeah, I'll start with that.
Can I start? No, Randy, start, please. Good. Oh, I was just going to start by saying that in the same way we diagnose, for example, a disease or a health condition, we also diagnose fear. That we diagnose what's driving our fear. And the good news is we actually know what drives fear. Turns out the least important factor driving fear are the facts. What drives fear are emotions. And there are 19 different emotions. And I would argue the first step is to figure out which are the emotions that are driving our fears. It might be emotions driven by lack of trust, for example, in our own expertise or in the expertise of others. It might be because we don't feel we have any personal control over the issue. It might be because we feel we're being unfairly treated in this situation. That if you start going through in the same way we diagnose a health condition, we also diagnose those 19 emotional factors. Where do we stand on those? And then you can start addressing that particular factor. Very quick answer, suggesting some complexity as would be if you were diagnosing a disease. Randy.
I think another way of thinking, Cesar, it's a great question. And I think there's a cute analogy I think that many of us physicians would know about, is that when you arrive at the scene of a code, first take your own pulse, right? It's that same concept is, check in, we all have fears. Of course we do. You wouldn't be human if you weren't afraid of COVID-19. Let's be real. That's what it is. And I think it's important just to know that, check in with yourself before you go into that conversation so that you can touch your own fears for a minute, know where they are. And now that you've identified them, said hello, shook hands, maybe, whatever it took.
With yourself.
Then you're right with yourself. Then you're in a stronger position, I believe, to help somebody else work through their fears. Because a lot of these conversations are going to be heavily influenced by fear. So it's one of the things we must get our grip on. If you think about COVID-19, one of the biggest words that's going to go with it is fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of bad things happening, fear of other people getting sick, fear of causing something to somebody else. The list goes on and on and on. So I think we just it's important just to check in with our own, know where we are, shake hands, make a deal with ourselves, and then we're in a stronger position to deal with the person. It's a great question, Cesar.
Yeah, great.
So,
thank you, Cesar.
I have a question going back to social media. So we talked about how when we're communicating in person about the messaging and all that. Do you have a pointer about how best to communicate on social media? We're all forced, I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, try to, there's always a little bit of hesitancy with physicians being on there, but what are some tools, just the way you've given us, the 2793, the KDK, is there something that we can take away for communicating using social media?
I'll start very quickly and say that the first is you have to find out, you have to be there first of all. We really can't talk about social media unless you have a presence. The question though is where are the people I want to influence? And there's three types of influence. Number one, I want to establish trust. I want to inform them, and I also want to influence their attitudes and behaviors. Once I've decided that, I have to decide where are they? And I'll give you a quick example. The other day I was talking to a young person and I said, we're talking about COVID, and I said, well, there's a lot of information on Facebook, and I can give you the names of the number of the groups in Facebook that are talking well about COVID, including influencers. And he said, unfortunately, this is my nephew. He said, I don't use Facebook. That's what the geezers use. That's what you use. That's what the old folks use. I wouldn't even touch. In fact, I would not even be seen around anybody who's using Facebook. I use Instagram, TikTok, etc. You're in the wrong place. That wasn't very helpful. So,
Right.
So then I also pulled up my Instagram sites where I feel there's good information, TikTok sites where people are dancing and talking about COVID or whatever. So I was able to recover trust, but initially I was at the wrong place. Even though I was there many places, I was in the wrong place in order to address my audience. Randy.
I couldn't agree more. My 16-year-old reminds me daily of how little I know about what goes on. I think it is important to know who you're talking to and where they're getting their information. I mean, social media, remember, is a tool that's very targeted to certain segments of the audience out there. It's a very targeted tool as opposed to a more mass media. And so it's important, and various social media sites have specific clientele that use them heavily, and you can actually get this information about what, who they cater to, and that's important to know. I go back to the concept of knowing your story, getting your story together in that key message map. If it's a particular issue, or if it's just about you, or if it's you and COVID-19, or whatever the issue is you're trying to address, and just use that story as your map, your message map for guiding yourself through the social media jungle. And I think that will probably that should serve you well. Social media is very much presence, and I think honestly, a practicing physician to be a real social media hound is almost a time impossibility given the amount of time that's necessary. So I would think also is pick and choose, pick your battles, pick where you want to be, and go from there.
I'll add one side note on social media is that once you've decided which places to be, each has a different rules of engagement. For example, Twitter, originally 140 characters. That's approximately 27 words. Perfect for the message map. You just now take the cream off the top of the message map, which is the 3 key messages in 27 words, and you've got automatically a tweet ready to go.
Wow, it's really great. I never connected those two. Thad Waits has a comment from a patient that I would like to have him say, and then I'm going to do my closing after that. So Thad.
Thank you, Dipti. This has been truly a great discussion. I've learned a lot. I also learned well from a patient's family member. One day in comprehensive brevity, I was trying my best to explain a PCI and what we had done and about the arteries. He cut me off and said, "Sir, what you're trying to say is you done it and you done good."
You done it.
So well said.
Right. That might be the billboard for CDC or WHO. We done it and we done good, or at least trying our best. That's great. I love it. That's great.
So before I make my closing comments, I'm going to give both of you just a quick closing. Do you want to make a closing comment, Vincent, and then maybe Randy, and then I'm going to say my closing.
My closing comment is just to thank you, Dipti, and giving us the opportunity to chat with you and to share coffee. And I also want to thank you for the coffee cup. I've already shared with several people, and they said, "Where can I get that beautiful?" And it's a very roomy coffee cup too.
Yeah.
It has room for more than 7 ounces of coffee, so I like that because I like a big cup.
Randy.
Dipti, again, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you also for the excellent conversation that we've had with the people from your world here. It's been outstanding, the questions and the interaction. And my leave message for everybody is pay very close attention to the communicating in these high stress, high concern settings, because the rules are different. And if we adapt to those rules, we'll just be so much more effective. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I want to thank my guests, Dr. Randall Hyer and Dr. Vincent Covello, for joining us at this virtual ACC coffee table today. And the recordings of these sessions are on the ACC YouTube page, typically a few days after the event. And then next month, we're going to gather again on Saturday, December 4th, same time, to speak with Dr. Michelle Albert, who's the incoming president for AHA, and Dr. Ed Childs, who's actually a trauma surgeon, a critical care trauma surgeon at the Morehouse School of College, and who is the incoming new board member for the ACC. And we're going to be talking about health equity. So for those of you that have joined me, know that I always want to end with a toast. So we're all going to lift, so Randy and Vincent, we're all going to lift our mug and we're going to toast and say, may your coffee be strong, may your day be full, may we help, may we heal, and may we advance heart care worldwide together. Thank you all for stopping by. Have a fantastic weekend.
Cheers.
Cheers.